The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony of New Haven as Sarah finished her shift report. The small human settlement on the edge of 442B had been quiet for months, exactly how the colonists liked it. 20,000 humans called this rocky world home, far from the politics and wars that plagued the inner systems. Sarah walked through the dusty streets toward her small apartment, nodding to neighbors who were starting their day. Children played in the courtyards while their parents prepared for work in the mineral extraction facilities. It was a simple life, but a good one. The Galactic Trade Federation had granted humans mining rights to this system 50 years ago, and the colony had thrived ever since. What the colonists didn't know was that 3 days earlier, the Galactic Trade Federation had been dissolved. In its place stood the Empire, a military dictatorship that viewed humans as nothing more than a pest species that had spread too far across the galaxy. Commander of the Imperial Dreadnought Crimson Talon reviewed the tactical display showing the human settlement below. The massive ship, stretching over 2 kilometers in length, hung in orbit like a dark omen. Its weapons could reduce the entire colony to ash in minutes. "Sir, the humans appear to have no defensive capabilities," reported Lieutenant, his scaled hands dancing over the control panel. "Their largest vessel is a cargo transport. No shields, minimal armor, basic fusion engines." His mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Like all, he stood nearly 3 meters tall, his reptilian features enhanced by cybernetic implants that glowed with soft blue light. The Empire had conquered dozens of systems over the past century, but humans had always been considered too primitive to pose a real threat. "Typical human overconfidence," mused, his voice a low growl. "They establish colonies in remote systems and assume no one will bother them. Today they learn why the galaxy fears the Empire." The plan was simple. The Imperial fleet would offer the humans a choice: submit to Imperial rule and become slave labor for the Empire's mining operations, or face complete annihilation. Either outcome served the Empire's goals. Down on the surface, Colony Administrator received an incoming transmission on the emergency channel. The 50-year-old administrator had served in the old Earth Navy before becoming a civilian, and something about the formal tone of the message made his instincts flare. "Human settlement, this is Commander of the Imperial Fleet," the translated voice crackled through the speakers. "Your government no longer exists. You will surrender your mining operations to the Empire and submit to Imperial authority. You have 1 standard hour to respond." Stared at the communication panel, his mind racing. The colony's small security force consisted of 20 volunteers with basic training and outdated equipment. They had no military vessels, no orbital defenses, and no way to contact other human settlements for help. He activated the colony-wide alert system, and within minutes the main assembly hall was packed with worried colonists. Stood at the podium, looking out at faces he had known for years. These were miners, engineers, teachers, and farmers. They had come to this distant world seeking peace, not war. "Friends," began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We've received a demand for surrender from something called the Empire. They claim our government no longer exists and want us to become their slaves." Angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah stood up from her seat near the front. "What are our options?" "Honestly, we can surrender and hope they treat us fairly, or we can refuse and face whatever consequences they have planned." Paused, studying the faces before him. "But there's something else we need to consider. If this Empire is moving against human colonies, New Haven might not be their only target." Doctor, the colony's chief scientist, raised her hand. "I've been monitoring deep space communications. There have been scattered reports of attacks on human outposts in the Vega sectors. If this is a coordinated campaign against our species." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implications. An older miner named Tom Bradley stood up, his weathered face grim. "My grandfather fought in the resource wars back on Earth. He always said that bullies only understand one language." He looked around the room. "I say we tell these Empire folks where they can stick their demands." A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd, but held up his hand for quiet. "I understand the sentiment, Tom, but we need to be realistic about our situation. We're facing a military force with advanced technology and overwhelming numbers." "Then what do you suggest?" asked Doctor. Was quiet for a long moment, then his expression hardened with determination. We buy time and we run, but not before we make sure these understand what they're dealing with. While the colonists debated their response, Chief Engineer Martinez was already moving. As the former captain of a deep space freighter, she understood spacecraft better than anyone else on New Haven. She gathered her small team in the main engineering bay of the colony's industrial complex. "Listen up," said, her hands already working on a portable computer. "We've got maybe 45 minutes before these Empire types lose patience. We can't fight a dreadnought, but we can make sure they remember this day." Her assistant, Jake, looked confused. "What do you have in mind, Chief?" Pointed to the massive fusion reactor that powered the colony's mining operations. "This baby puts out enough energy to power a small city. With some creative modifications, we can turn it into something much more interesting." "You're talking about overloading the reactor?" Jake asked, his eyes widening. "Not overloading," corrected with a dangerous smile. "Weaponizing. The mining charges we use for excavation contain compressed antimatter. If we can rig a delivery system and use the reactor to power a magnetic containment field." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. "That's insane. Even if it works, the explosion would be visible from orbit." "That's the idea," replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "These think humans are weak and primitive. Let's show them what human engineering can accomplish when we're motivated." Meanwhile, Sarah was leading a different kind of preparation. As the colony's communications officer, she had access to the quantum relay network that connected human settlements across the galaxy. Working frantically, she began transmitting a detailed message about the threat to every human outpost within range. "This is New Haven Colony in the system," she broadcast. "We are under attack by an alien force calling itself the Empire. They claim our government has been dissolved and are demanding our surrender. Unknown number of ships, advanced technology, hostile intentions. All human settlements should prepare for possible attack. We will resist as long as possible." The message would take hours or days to reach its destinations, but Sarah knew it might be the only warning other colonies would receive. Commander watched the chronometer count down the final minutes of the ultimatum. The humans had sent no response, which meant they were either too frightened to communicate or too stubborn to surrender. Either way, the outcome would be the same. "Sir," Lieutenant reported, "I'm detecting increased activity around the human settlement. Multiple fusion signatures and some kind of energy buildup." Cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the tactical display. "Probably trying to power up their communications array to call for help. It won't do them any good. Begin the demonstration bombardment. Target their industrial facilities." The Crimson Talon's main batteries rotated toward the planet's surface. Particle beams capable of melting through ship armor focused on the mining complex where Martinez was making her final preparations. On the surface, stood in the colony's command center, watching the Imperial ship through the observatory's telescope. The massive vessel's weapons were clearly visible, glowing with ominous energy. "Sir," called out Technician Davis from his console, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Imperial ship. They're targeting the industrial sector." Grabbed the internal communications microphone. "All personnel in industrial sectors evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." But Martinez wasn't evacuating. She was putting the finishing touches on what she privately called humanity's calling card. The fusion reactor was now connected to a magnetic bottle containing enough compressed antimatter to crack a moon. When the bombardment hit, the containment field would fail in a very specific way. "Chief, we need to go," Jake shouted over the rising hum of the overloaded systems. Made one final adjustment to the timer mechanism. 30 seconds, Jake. When those beams hit, this whole complex is going to become a miniature star." They ran from the industrial complex just as the first particle beams struck the outer buildings. The weapons carved through metal and concrete like a hot knife through butter, exactly as had calculated. The beams reached the reactor facility and punched through the outer containment walls. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the magnetic bottle containing the antimatter lost integrity. The explosion was unlike anything seen in the system for billions of years. A sphere of pure energy expanded outward from the industrial complex, vaporizing everything within a kilometer radius. The shockwave flattened buildings across half the colony and sent a pillar of superheated plasma reaching toward the sky. Commander was thrown from his command chair as the Crimson Talon shuddered under the impact of the explosion's energy wave. Emergency! Klaxons wailed throughout the ship as systems overloaded and displays flickered. "Report!" roared, pulling himself upright. Lieutenant Claus scrambled over his instruments. "Sir, massive energy discharge from the planet's surface. The explosion registered 2.7. Our shields absorbed most of the impact, but we've lost several sensor arrays." Stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The energy signature was impossible. No human technology should be capable of generating that kind of destructive power. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that a primitive mining colony just hit an Imperial dreadnought with a weapon that registered on our shields?" "Yes, sir," replied nervously. "The explosion appears to have been centered on their industrial complex. It's possible they weaponized their fusion reactor." His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among his species. In 50 years of Imperial service, he had never seen anything like this. The humans had turned their own infrastructure into a weapon powerful enough to damage a capital ship. On the planet's surface, the surviving colonists picked themselves up from where the shockwave had thrown them. Half the settlement was in ruins, but they were alive. More importantly, they had just announced to the galaxy that humans would not go quietly into slavery. Sarah's communication equipment had been damaged in the blast, but backup systems were already coming online. She immediately began broadcasting a new message. "This is New Haven Colony. We have engaged the Imperial force. Humans do not surrender. Humans do not kneel. We will make them pay for every world they take." Surveyed the damage to his colony with mixed emotions. They had lost nearly everything they had built over decades, but they had also delivered a message that would echo across the galaxy. The Empire thought humans were weak and helpless. They had just learned their first lesson about human determination. Doctor was already organizing medical teams to help the wounded when she noticed something on her portable scanner. "You need to see this. The quantum relay is picking up responses to Sarah's message." The administrator looked at the device's small screen and felt his heart skip a beat. Confirmation signals were coming in from human colonies throughout the Outer Rim. New Terra, Station, Genesis Prime, and dozens of other settlements were acknowledging the warning and preparing their own defenses. "It's starting," said quietly. "Whatever happens next, the Empire is going to find out that humans don't fight alone." Commander was receiving similar reports from across Imperial space. Long-range sensors detected increased activity at human settlements in multiple sectors. The primitive species that should have collapsed at the first show of Imperial force was instead mobilizing for war. "Sir," Lieutenant said hesitantly, "Command is requesting a status report on the pacification operation." Studied the tactical display showing the surface of New Haven. The humans had sacrificed their own colony to land a single blow against the Empire, and in doing so, they had transformed what should have been a simple conquest into something much more complicated. "Tell Command that the human threat has been reassessed," replied. "Request additional fleet assets. It appears we're going to need them." The Crimson Talon turned away from New Haven's devastated surface, but the damage was done. Across the galaxy, humanity was awakening to a new reality. The peaceful coexistence they had enjoyed for generations was over. The Empire wanted a war of conquest. They were about to discover that humans had been preparing for war since before they left their home planet. The only question was whether the Empire would realize their mistake before it was too late to stop what they had started. In the ruins of New Haven, the surviving colonists began the long work of evacuation. They had lost their home, but they had gained something more valuable. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not go quietly into the dark. The Empire had made a fatal error in judgment. They had given humans a reason to unite, and a cause worth fighting for. The war that followed would reshape the galaxy, but it would begin with a simple message that spread from world to world. Humans do not surrender. Admiral Helena stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the tactical display that showed the positions of 67 human warships spread across the Tau system. 3 months had passed since the New Haven incident, and humanity's response had been swift and decisive. The old human colonial authority was gone, replaced by the United Earth System's military command structure. The Prometheus itself was a testament to human adaptability. Originally a deep space cargo hauler, The ship had been converted into a heavy cruiser in just 6 weeks. Her cargo bays now housed missile launchers, her hull bristled with rail guns, and her fusion engines had been modified to power military-grade shield generators. "Admiral," reported Commander from the tactical station, "long-range sensors are picking up fleet signatures. 12 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers. They'll be in weapons range in 40 minutes." Helena nodded grimly. Intelligence reports from across human space painted a clear picture. The Empire was expanding rapidly, conquering smaller species and enslaving their populations. Humanity appeared to be next on their list, but the Empire was about to learn that humans were different from their previous victims. "Signal the fleet," Helena ordered. "Formation Omega-7 will let them come to us." The human ships began moving into position, their movements coordinated by quantum communication links that the couldn't intercept. Unlike the Empire's rigid military hierarchy, human naval doctrine emphasized flexibility and independent thinking among ship captains. Captain Maria Santos commanded the converted frigate UES Defiance, formerly a passenger liner that now carried enough firepower to level a city. Her crew was a mix of former merchant marines, ex-military personnel, and volunteers who had lost family in the Imperial attacks. "Captain," called out Weapons Officer Peters, "we're receiving tactical updates from the fleet net. The ships are maintaining standard Imperial formation patterns." Maria smiled coldly. Human intelligence had been studying Imperial tactics for months, analyzing every battle report and communication intercept they could gather. They were militarily superior in terms of technology and firepower, but they were also predictable. "They think they're facing another primitive species," Maria said to her bridge crew. "They're about to learn why humans conquered their own planet before they reached the stars." Meanwhile, on the Imperial flagship Void Reaper, Fleet Commander was reviewing the tactical situation with growing confidence. The human fleet appeared to be a collection of converted civilian vessels with minimal combat capability. Intelligence reports suggested that humans had only been building warships for a few months. "Commander," reported his sensor officer, "the human vessels are taking up defensive positions around the 4th planet. Their formation appears unusual." Or studied the display with his cybernetic implants whirring softly. The human ships were spread out in what looked like a random pattern, with no clear command structure or tactical coherence. It was exactly what he expected from a species that had never fought a real war. "Primitive thinking," Or said dismissively. "They're treating this like a territorial defense rather than a naval engagement. Begin standard attack formation. We'll demonstrate proper Imperial tactics." The ships moved into their traditional assault pattern. Heavy cruisers in the center with destroyer escorts on the flanks, advancing in a steady line that would bring maximum firepower to bear on the largest concentration of enemy vessels. Admiral watched the Imperial formation with satisfaction. Human naval doctrine had evolved from centuries of warfare on Earth's oceans, where flexibility and deception often trumped raw firepower. They were making the same mistake that many Earth navies had made throughout history. They were fighting the last war instead of adapting to their current enemy. "All ships," Helena transmitted, "execute Hunter Protocol in 30 seconds." The Hunter Protocol was humanity's answer to Imperial numerical superiority. Instead of trying to match the Empire ship for ship, human forces would use speed, stealth, and coordinated attacks to overwhelm individual targets before moving on to the next. As the fleet closed to optimal weapons range, the human formation suddenly exploded into motion. Ships that had been clustered together scattered in all directions, their fusion engines burning at maximum output. What had looked like a disorganized defensive position revealed itself as a carefully planned ambush. The UES Lightning Strike, a converted racing yacht now bristling with missiles, accelerated to nearly impossible speeds as it curved around behind the formation. Captain James Wright had spent 20 years racing ships between star systems, and he knew how to make a vessel dance through space like it was alive. "Weapons lock on the trailing destroyer," Wright announced to his crew. "Fire all tubes." 16 missiles streaked out from the Lightning Strike's launchers, their plasma warheads designed specifically to penetrate shield technology. The Imperial destroyer's point defense systems managed to intercept half the incoming projectiles, but 8 direct hits overwhelmed its shields and tore through the hull. Before they could respond, the lightning strike was already accelerating away, using the planet's gravity well to slingshot toward its next target. Fleet Commander watched in disbelief as his trailing destroyer exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations. The human ship responsible was already kilometers away and closing on another Imperial vessel. "How are they moving so fast?" he demanded. "Sir," his tactical officer replied nervously, "the human ships appear to be using modified civilian engines. Their acceleration curves are 40% higher than our projections indicated." "Impossible," snarled. "Civilian engines cannot generate that kind of performance." What the fleet commander didn't understand was that human-civilian technology had always pushed the boundaries of physics out of necessity. Cargo haulers needed to make long journeys profitable, passenger liners had to maintain schedules across vast distances, and racing ships were built for pure speed. When converted to military use, these vessels retained their specialized advantages. Admiral was coordinating the battle from the Prometheus, but she wasn't trying to control every ship individually. Human naval doctrine trusted individual captains to make tactical decisions based on the overall strategic situation. "Admiral," Commander reported, "the Defiance is making an attack run on the lead cruiser. Captain Santos is requesting fire support." "Grant it," Helena replied. "Signal the Marathon and Endurance to coordinate with her approach." The three human ships converged on the Imperial heavy cruiser from different angles, their weapons systems linked by quantum communication. The ship found itself facing a coordinated assault from multiple directions, its defensive fire divided between targets moving at different speeds and vectors. Captain Santos watched her tactical display as the Empire ship's shields fluctuated under the combined assault. "Target their shield generators," she ordered. "All batteries, focused fire on Grid 77 Alpha." The concentrated firepower from three ships overwhelmed the cruiser's shield grid, leaving it vulnerable to follow-up attacks. Before they could reroute power to backup systems, human missiles were already impacting against the hull. But the Imperial fleet was adapting to human tactics. Fleet Commander reorganized his remaining ships into smaller, more flexible groups that could respond to the humans' hit-and-run attacks. "All ships," he transmitted, "abandon standard formation. Engage the human vessels individually, show them the fury of the Empire." The ships began pursuing their human counterparts across the system, using their superior firepower to force the humans into defensive maneuvers. For several minutes, it appeared that Imperial tactics were gaining the upper hand. Then the second phase of the human plan began. Admiral had been holding 12 ships in reserve, hiding them in the sensor shadow of Tao's largest moon. These vessels, led by Captain Stone aboard the UES Hammer, represented humanity's innovation, purpose-built warships designed from the ground up for space combat. "All ships," Captain Stone transmitted to her strike group, "we are clear to engage. Show them what happens when humans get serious about warfare." The UES Hammer was humanity's first attempt at designing a pure combat vessel. Unlike the converted civilian ships that made up most of the human fleet, she had been built with lessons learned from months of fighting the Empire. Her hull was designed to dissipate energy weapon fire, her engines could generate acceleration that would crush an unprotected human, and her weapons systems incorporated technology reverse-engineered from captured equipment. The 12 new warships emerged from their hiding place and accelerated toward the Imperial fleet at velocities that exceeded anything they had seen from human vessels. Their approach was detected immediately, but the Empire ships were scattered across the system pursuing other targets. Fleet Commander felt the first stirrings of concern as he watched the tactical display. These new human ships were moving faster and with more coordination than the converted civilian vessels. Their energy signatures suggested purpose-built military equipment. "Sir," his sensor officer reported with barely concealed alarm, "the new human vessels are showing thermal signatures consistent with military-grade fusion plants. Their weapons arrays appear to be significantly larger than our previous projections." The lead human warship, the UES Hammer, targeted the nearest Imperial destroyer and opened fire with weapons that had never existed in human space 3 months earlier. Particle beams designed using principles stolen from captured technology carved through Imperial shields like they were made of paper. The destroyer lasted exactly 47 seconds. Captain Stone smiled grimly as the enemy ship disappeared in an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. Target the next ship. Let's see how many we can take down before they regroup. Across the system, human tactics were proving their effectiveness. The converted civilian ships used their speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of Imperial pursuit, while the purpose-built warships delivered devastating attacks that eliminated enemy vessels with mechanical efficiency. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, watching the battle from the science station aboard the Prometheus, was recording everything for future analysis. As humanity's leading expert on alien technology, she had spent months studying captured equipment and developing countermeasures. "Admiral," she reported, "the Imperial ships are showing signs of tactical adaptation. They're trying to coordinate their fire to overwhelm individual targets." Helena nodded. She had expected the to adapt eventually. The Empire hadn't conquered dozens of species by being stupid, even if they were predictable. "Signal all ships," the Admiral ordered. "Begin Phase 3. Phase 3 of the human battle plan was pure psychology. Instead of continuing their attacks, the human fleet began a coordinated withdrawal toward the outer system. It would appear that humanity was retreating in the face of superior Imperial tactics. Fleet Commander felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched the human ships flee. Despite their initial success, the primitive species was no match for the disciplined might of the Empire. "All ships pursue the human fleet," he ordered. "Do not let them escape to spread word of our campaign." The Imperial ships formed up and began chasing the withdrawing humans, their crews confident that victory was within reach. The human vessels appeared to be pushing their engines to maximum output, but technology was superior. They would catch their prey within the hour. What Fleet Commander didn't know was that the human fleet was leading him exactly where Admiral wanted him to go. The outer edge of the Tau system contained an asteroid field that human mining ships had been working for decades. The rocks had been hollowed out and converted into hidden weapons platforms, each one equipped with enough firepower to cripple a capital ship. Admiral watched her tactical display as the Imperial fleet followed her ships deeper into the asteroid field. They were so focused on their pursuit that they failed to notice the unusual energy signatures coming from some of the larger rocks. "All platforms," Helena transmitted on a coded frequency, "weapons free, fire at will." The asteroid field exploded into light as dozens of hidden weapons platforms opened fire simultaneously. Particle beams and missile volleys emerged from rocks that had appeared completely inert moments before. The Imperial fleet found itself surrounded by enemies they couldn't see until it was too late. Fleet Commander Orr's flagship shuddered under the impact of multiple energy beams as his tactical display dissolved into chaos. Enemy contacts were appearing throughout the asteroid field, each one representing a weapons platform that had been invisible until it opened fire. "Sir," his tactical officer shouted over the sound of alarms, "we're reading 47 distinct energy sources. The entire asteroid field is weaponized." Orr realized with growing horror that the human retreat had been a trap. His fleet was now surrounded by fixed defenses, while human mobile units attacked from the flanks. The Empire had walked directly into a carefully planned ambush. "All ships," he transmitted desperately, "emergency acceleration. Break out of the field immediately." But it was too late. The human weapons platforms had been positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that covered every escape route. Imperial ships that tried to flee found themselves running into concentrated barrages that overwhelmed even their superior shielding. Captain Santos aboard the Defiance watched with satisfaction as Imperial vessels disintegrated under the coordinated assault. "This is what happens when you underestimate human planning," she said to her bridge crew. The battle lasted another 20 minutes, but the outcome was never in doubt once the Imperial fleet entered the asteroid field. Human weapons platforms and mobile ships worked together to systematically destroy every vessel, using tactics that combined the flexibility of space combat with the devastating firepower of prepared defensive positions. When the last Imperial ship exploded, Admiral surveyed the battlefield with mixed emotions. Humanity had won its first major victory against the Empire, but the cost had been significant. 7 human ships had been destroyed, and nearly 1,000 crew members had given their lives. "Admiral," Commander reported, "we're receiving priority communications from Earth Command. They want a full tactical report as soon as possible. Helena nodded. The victory at Tau would be analyzed and studied by every human military commander in the galaxy. The tactics used here would be refined and improved, then shared with other human fleets preparing to face Imperial invasion. Dr. Harper was already examining wreckage from the destroyed ships, her teams working to recover any technology that might give humanity an advantage in future battles. Every piece of Imperial equipment was a potential source of intelligence about their capabilities and weaknesses. Elizabeth, Admiral asked, "What's your initial assessment of their technology?" The scientist looked up from her preliminary scans. "Advanced but not revolutionary, Admiral. Their weapons and shields are superior to what we had 3 months ago, but not by as much as they probably believe. The real advantage we have is tactical flexibility. They fight like they expect every enemy to behave exactly the same way." Admiral smiled grimly. "Then we'll make sure to keep surprising them." The news of humanity's victory at Tau spread quickly through both human space and the Empire. For humans, it was proof that the Empire could be defeated. It was the first indication that they had seriously misjudged their enemy. In the Imperial capital, military commanders were demanding explanations for how a primitive species had managed to destroy an entire fleet. The reports from Fleet Commander Or's final transmissions painted a disturbing picture of human capabilities that contradicted everything the Empire thought it knew about the species. But Emperor, supreme ruler of the Empire, was not concerned about a single tactical defeat. Humanity controlled less than 50 star systems, while the Empire spanned thousands of worlds. Even if the humans could win individual battles, they lacked the resources for a prolonged conflict. "Double our forces in human space," the Emperor ordered his military advisors. "If this species wishes to resist, we will show them what happens when primitive races challenge the might of the Empire." The order would send over 200 Imperial warships toward human territory, a force large enough to crush any resistance. But Emperor was making the same mistake that countless rulers throughout history had made. He was underestimating an enemy he didn't truly understand. Admiral received intelligence reports about the massive Imperial fleet heading toward human space, and she knew that the victory at Tau was only the beginning. Humanity would need every advantage it could find to survive what was coming. But as she looked out at the wreckage of the fleet floating among the asteroids, Helena felt a surge of confidence. Humans had always been at their best when facing impossible odds. The Empire wanted a war, and they were about to discover exactly what that meant when fighting a species that had spent perfecting the art of warfare. The massive Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. 237 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the cold light of distant stars. At the center of the formation, the super-dreadnought Empire's Fury stretched nearly 4 kilometers in length, its weapons capable of cracking planets. Supreme Fleet Commander Or stood on the command bridge, his cybernetic implants glowing with satisfaction as he surveyed the tactical display. The human lay defenseless before the mightiest fleet ever assembled by the Empire. This would be more than a conquest. It would be a demonstration to the galaxy of what happened to species that dared resist Imperial will. "Sir," reported his tactical coordinator, "sensors are detecting minimal human defensive positions. Orbital platforms around their primary world, perhaps 30 vessels of various classifications. Their entire fleet appears to number less than 100 ships." Or's mandibles clicked in amusement. Intelligence reports had warned that humans were unpredictable fighters, but numbers didn't lie. Even if every human ship was as effective as the vessels at Tau, they were still outnumbered more than 2 to 1. "Open a channel to the human," Or commanded. "Let them hear the voice of their conqueror." On Earth, President Sarah Martinez stood in the United Earth Command Center, watching the tactical display that showed the enormous Imperial fleet holding position at the system's edge. The woman who had been a colonial administrator just 6 months earlier now carried the weight of humanity's survival on her shoulders. "Madam President," reported Admiral from the main tactical station, "the Imperial fleet is hailing us." Sarah straightened her shoulders and nodded. "Put them through." The main screen filled with the reptilian features of Supreme Fleet Commander, or his cybernetic enhancements glowing with cruel intelligence. When he spoke, The translation software rendered his words in cold, mechanical tones. Human government, or began, I am Supreme Fleet Commander or of the Empire. Your species has been judged guilty of resistance to Imperial authority. Surrender unconditionally within 1 standard hour, or I will demonstrate why the galaxy fears the Empire's wrath. President Martinez met the alien commander's gaze without flinching. Commander, or I am President Sarah Martinez of the United Earth Systems. We have a message for your empire. Humanity does not kneel. Or's expression shifted to one of amusement. Your primitive fleet cannot hope to stand against Imperial might. I offer you this one chance to preserve your species. Refuse, and I will reduce you to molten rock. You're welcome to try, Sarah replied calmly. But you might want to ask Fleet Commander or how well that worked out for him at Tau. Oh, that's right, you can't. He's dead. The communication channel closed, leaving or staring at a blank screen. The human leader's defiance was either the bravest thing he had ever witnessed or the most foolish. In 1 hour, he would discover which. As the Imperial ultimatum counted down, Admiral Helena was making final preparations aboard the UES Prometheus. The human fleet had grown significantly since Tau, but they were still facing overwhelming odds. Victory would require more than courage. It would require the kind of tactical innovation that had made humanity the dominant species on Earth. All ships report ready, Admiral, Commander announced from the tactical station. The Sol defense grid is fully operational, and all civilian populations have been evacuated to the underground shelters. Helena nodded grimly. The Sol defense grid was humanity's latest innovation, a network of weapons platforms, sensor arrays, and automated defenses that turned the entire star system into a fortress. Every asteroid, moon, and orbital station had been weaponized. If the wanted Earth, they would have to fight for every kilometer of space. Admiral, Dr. Harper called out from the science station, the Prometheus project is showing green across all systems. We're ready to implement on your command. The Prometheus project represented humanity's most desperate gamble. Using technology reverse-engineered from captured equipment, human scientists had developed a weapons system that could theoretically level the playing field against Imperial forces. The catch was that it had never been tested under combat conditions. Captain Stone commanded the spearhead force aboard the UES Titan, humanity's and most powerful warship. Built in the orbital shipyards above Mars, the Titan incorporated every lesson learned from 6 months of fighting the Empire. Her hull could withstand direct hits from Imperial heavy weapons, her engines could outrun anything in service, and her weapons systems were designed to eliminate enemy ships with surgical precision. Captain, reported her tactical officer, long-range sensors show the Imperial fleet beginning to advance. Estimated time to weapons range, 45 minutes. Studied the tactical display showing the massive enemy formation. They were advancing in their traditional pattern, heavy ships in the center with escorts screening the flanks. It was a formation designed to bring maximum firepower to bear while protecting the most valuable vessels. They're doing exactly what we expected, said to her bridge crew. Signal the fleet, execute formation Delta. The human ships began moving into position, but this time their deployment was different from any previous engagement. Instead of spreading out to avoid concentrated fire, the human fleet was condensing into a tight formation that would normally be suicidal against superior numbers. Supreme Fleet Commander watched the human deployment with growing satisfaction. The enemy was making the same mistake that countless species had made before them, concentrating their forces in a desperate attempt to achieve local superiority. It would only make them easier to destroy. All ships, transmitted, maintain formation and advance to optimal firing range. We will crush this human fleet in a single decisive engagement. The Imperial fleet moved forward with mechanical precision, 237 ships advancing in perfect coordination. Their weapons systems charged, their shields at maximum power. They represented the accumulated military might of an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. But Admiral was not planning to fight a conventional battle. All ships, Helena transmitted on the fleet command frequency, initiate Prometheus protocol, full implementation in 30 seconds. Throughout the human fleet, exotic matter generators came online, their energy signatures carefully masked by modified sensor baffles. The technology was based on principles discovered in captured power cores. but human engineers had found a way to weaponize it that the Empire had never imagined. Dr. Harper monitored the exotic matter buildup from her station aboard the Prometheus. Admiral, we're showing stable field generation across all participating vessels. The quantum entanglement matrix is holding within acceptable parameters. How long can we maintain it? Helena asked. Theoretical maximum is 18 minutes, Harper replied. After that, the exotic matter will destabilize and the effect will collapse. 18 minutes to defeat an enemy fleet that outnumbered them more than 2-1. Helena had faced better odds, but not many. The two fleets closed to weapons range, and Supreme Fleet Commander gave the order to open fire. The Imperial formation unleashed a devastating barrage that should have vaporized the concentrated human ships in seconds. Instead, something impossible happened. The human fleet flickered out of existence. For exactly 1.7 seconds, every human warship in the Sol system existed in a state of quantum superposition, occupying all possible locations simultaneously. To the sensors, it appeared as if the enemy fleet had simply vanished. When the human ships reappeared, they were scattered throughout the Imperial formation, having used principles of quantum mechanics to essentially teleport past enemy defenses. Each human vessel materialized within point-blank range of a target. The UES Titan materialized less than 1,000 meters from an Imperial heavy cruiser, close enough for Captain Stone to see the details of the enemy ship's hull through the main viewer. All weapons, she ordered, fire. The Titan's particle beams carved through the ship at ranges where shields were meaningless and armor provided no protection. The enemy cruiser disintegrated in a chain of secondary explosions before its crew could even comprehend what had happened. Throughout the Imperial formation, the same scene was playing out as human ships materialized next to enemy vessels and opened fire at ranges measured in hundreds of meters. The carefully planned battle line collapsed into chaos as ships exploded without warning. Supreme Fleet Commander watched in horror as his tactical display dissolved into madness. In less than 30 seconds, the Imperial fleet had lost over 40 ships to an attack method that shouldn't have been physically possible. Sir, his sensor officer shouted over the cacophony of alarms, the human ships appear to be using some form of quantum displacement technology. They're materializing inside our defensive perimeter. Impossible, snarled. No known technology can achieve instantaneous spatial displacement on that scale. But the evidence was undeniable. Human ships continued to flicker in and out of existence, appearing wherever they could do the most damage to the Imperial formation. Traditional naval tactics became meaningless when the enemy could ignore distance and defensive positions. Admiral coordinated the human assault from the bridge of the Prometheus, but she wasn't trying to micromanage individual ship movements. The Prometheus protocol required split-second timing and absolute trust in each captain's ability to make independent decisions. Admiral, Dr. Harper reported, quantum field stability is at 78% and falling. We can maintain this for another 12 minutes at most. Helena nodded. 12 minutes to break the back of the Imperial fleet, it would have to be enough. The human ships were taking casualties as well. The Prometheus protocol allowed them to bypass enemy defenses, but it couldn't make them invulnerable. Imperial ships that survived the initial surprise began adapting their tactics, using point defense systems and rapid-fire weapons to target human vessels at close range. The UES Defender materialized too close to an Imperial battleship and found itself facing the full fury of the enemy's secondary armament. Captain Williams managed to destroy his target, but not before his ship took critical damage to its engines and life support systems. "This is the Defender," Williams transmitted on the emergency frequency. "We're dead in space but still fighting. Give them hell for us." The damaged human ship continued firing until a direct hit from an Imperial particle cannon vaporized its forward hull. But before it died, the Defender took 2 more enemy ships with it. Supreme Fleet Commander was trying to reorganize his scattered formation when something even more disturbing appeared on his sensors. The human, which had appeared defenseless, was revealing hidden defenses that beggared the imagination. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as communication satellites suddenly unfolded into weapons arrays. The planet's moon revealed itself as a massive fortress bristling with enough firepower to destroy fleets. Even Earth's asteroid belt came alive with automated defense drones that emerged from hidden bases. "Sir," his tactical coordinator reported with barely controlled panic, "I'm reading over 1,500 distinct weapon signatures throughout the human system. The entire star system has been fortified." Or realized with growing dread that the humans had turned their entire into a trap. The Imperial fleet was not just fighting the human navy. They were fighting an entire star system that had been designed as a weapon. The Sol defense grid opened fire with coordinated precision that demonstrated months of planning and preparation. Particle beams from lunar installations targeted Imperial heavy ships while swarms of automated fighters emerged from hidden bases to harass enemy formations. Every piece of space debris had been weaponized, every orbital facility converted into a fortress. Captain Stone was coordinating her ship's movements with the defense grid when she noticed something troubling on her tactical display. "Tactical, what's the status on the Prometheus protocol?" "Quantum field stability down to 45%, Captain. We're starting to see prediction errors in the displacement matrix." Nodded grimly. The exotic matter generators were approaching their operational limits, which meant the human fleet would soon lose their primary tactical advantage. When that happened, they would be facing the remaining Imperial ships in conventional combat. "Signal Admiral," she ordered. "Recommend transition to Phase 2 while we still have quantum displacement capability." Phase 2 of the human battle plan was even more desperate than Phase 1. Using their remaining quantum displacement capability, the human fleet would attempt to capture or destroy the Imperial command ship. If they could eliminate Supreme Fleet Commander, and his staff, the remaining Imperial ships might withdraw rather than continue the battle without coordination. Admiral received Captain Stone's recommendation and quickly assessed the tactical situation. The human fleet had reduced the Imperial force by nearly 60 ships, but they were still outnumbered and running out of time before the Prometheus protocol failed. "All ships," Helena transmitted, "converge on the Imperial flagship. Maximum quantum displacement target the Super Dreadnought." Every remaining human warship that was capable of quantum displacement began converging on the Empire's Fury. The massive Imperial vessel found itself surrounded by human ships that materialized from every direction simultaneously. Supreme Fleet Commander watched death approaching from all sides as human vessels opened fire on his flagship at point-blank range. The Empire's Fury's massive shields flared and sparked under the concentrated assault, but the Super Dreadnought had been built to withstand entire fleets. "All batteries," ordered, "return fire. Destroy these human insects." The flagship's weapons systems responded with devastating firepower that vaporized 2 human destroyers and crippled a cruiser. But the remaining human ships continued their assault, their weapons systematically overloading the Imperial ship's defensive systems. Dr. Harper was monitoring the quantum field readings when she noticed a critical fluctuation. "Admiral, the exotic matter matrix is destabilizing faster than projected. We have maybe 2 minutes before complete collapse." Admiral made the hardest decision of her career. "All ships, emergency quantum displacement. Get clear of the Imperial flagship immediately." But Captain Stone had a different idea. "Titan to Fleet Command," she transmitted. "Request permission to implement terminal protocol." Helena's blood ran cold. The terminal protocol was a last-resort tactic that no one had wanted to use. It involved overloading a ship's quantum displacement system while in physical contact with an enemy vessel, creating a localized space-time distortion that would destroy both ships. "Negative," Helena replied. "There has to be another way." "Admiral," Captain Stone said calmly, "my ship has taken critical damage. Engines are failing and we can't maintain quantum displacement much longer anyway. Let us make it count." Before Admiral could respond, the UES Titan accelerated toward the Imperial flagship at maximum burn. The massive Super Dreadnought tried to maneuver away, but its size worked against it in the close-quarters battle. Captain Stone looked around her bridge one last time, taking in the faces of the crew that had followed her through 6 months of impossible battles. They had volunteered to die for Earth, and now they would have the chance to take humanity's greatest enemy with them. "All hands," she announced over the ship's communication system, It has been an honor serving with you, for Earth. The Titan rammed into the Empire's fury at a significant percentage of light speed, its hull crumpling against the Imperial ship's armored sides. In the moment of impact, Captain Stone activated the terminal protocol. The quantum displacement system, overloaded in a cascade of exotic matter reactions that tore a hole in spacetime itself. Both ships disappeared into a localized singularity that existed for exactly 0.003 seconds before reality reasserted itself. When the gravitational distortion cleared, both the UES Titan and the Imperial Superdreadnought were gone. In their place was a sphere of twisted space that would take decades to fully understand. The death of their flagship and supreme commander shattered what remained of Imperial coordination. Without Orr's leadership, the remaining ships found themselves facing a coordinated human defense with no clear tactical doctrine. Some Imperial captains attempted to continue the attack, only to be destroyed by the Sol defense grid's overwhelming firepower. Others tried to withdraw, but found their escape routes blocked by human ships that no longer needed to worry about conserving their quantum displacement capability. Admiral coordinated the final phase of the battle from the Prometheus, watching as the last Imperial resistance crumbled. The battle had cost humanity dearly, nearly 30 ships destroyed and thousands of lives lost, but they had achieved the impossible. Admiral, Commander reported, the remaining Imperial ships are requesting terms for surrender. Helena considered the request carefully. The Empire would undoubtedly send more fleets, but the surrender of these ships would provide valuable intelligence and demonstrate to the galaxy that the Empire could be defeated. Signal the Imperial ships, she ordered. Unconditional surrender, and they will be treated according to standard conventions of war. Any attempt to resume hostilities will result in immediate destruction. One by one, the surviving Imperial vessels powered down their weapons and surrendered to human forces. The Battle of Sol was over, but the war for humanity's survival was just beginning. President Martinez stood in the command center, watching the tactical display as the last Imperial ship surrendered. The cost had been enormous, but humanity had proven something that would resonate throughout the galaxy. The Empire was not invincible. Madam President, Admiral reported, preliminary casualty reports are coming in. We lost 31 ships and approximately 8,000 personnel, including Captain Stone and the entire crew of the Titan. Sarah nodded solemnly. Each number represented lives lost, families destroyed, dreams cut short. But their sacrifice had saved not just Earth, but the future of human civilization. Admiral, she said quietly, make sure their names are remembered, every one of them. The news of humanity's victory at Sol spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been conquered by the Empire suddenly saw hope for liberation. Neutral powers began reconsidering their relationships with Even within the Empire itself, cracks began to appear as subject races questioned the inevitability of imperial rule. Emperor received the reports of the battle's outcome in his throne room on the imperial capital world. The loss of an entire fleet, including a super-dreadnought and his most capable commander, was a disaster of unprecedented proportions. Your Majesty, his military advisor said carefully, perhaps we should reconsider our approach to the human problem. They have proven more resilient than anticipated. The Emperor's cybernetic implants flared with rage. No species has ever successfully resisted imperial conquest. The humans may have won a battle, but they cannot win a war against the combined might of 10,000 worlds. But privately, Emperor was beginning to wonder if he had awakened something that the Empire might not be able to control. The humans had demonstrated technological capabilities that shouldn't have been possible for such a young species. Worse, they had shown a willingness to sacrifice everything to protect their freedom. Admiral stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, looking out at the wreckage that littered the Sol system. Earth still hung in the void, blue and beautiful and unconquered. Humanity had survived its greatest test, but she knew the war was far from over. The Empire would return with even larger fleets and more advanced weapons, but humanity would be ready. They had proven that courage, innovation, and determination could triumph over overwhelming odds. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for. The war for humanity's survival would continue, but it would do so with the knowledge that humans would never surrender, never kneel, and never stop fighting for their right to exist among the stars. The Empire had wanted a war, and they had found one that would reshape the galaxy itself.